Welcome back in, Geico Outkick Studios. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We have got a wild day probably coming in the world with Election Day going on, and also the continuation of the NFL and college football. We've been breaking it all down for you. And a guy who has been on the show several different times, the big sports fan, also happens to be the governor of one of the biggest states in the country. He is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, I'm going to start with some sports, and we're going to move into some of the its own sport, I would imagine, which is politics. But first of all, thanks for getting up early with us on Election Day. I know it's going to be a wild one for you.
No, I'm happy to do it, and appreciate all you guys have done to advocate for sports being played at all levels.
Well, you were a big part in it, and I know for people out there who are regular listeners of this program, we tried to get as many different politicians who were willing to come out and say we need to play sports as we could. And I got to give you credit because almost of anyone out there, you came on our program and you said, hey, we need to play high school sports, football in particular, but all high school fall sports. You said that the ACC and the SEC needed to play in your state when it looked like college football was really under siege. And you've pushed for there to be crowds present with the Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I want to go. We've got a huge football audience, as you know, that is absolutely in love with the sport, and I know you are too. I want to start with high school, fall sports in particular. Everybody was out there saying, oh, my God, if kids play fall sports, there's going to be all sorts of disasters. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of states that are making that determination. What have you guys actually seen on the ground, both with high school football and all the other kids who've been playing fall sports in Florida?
Well, back in August, this was a battle. There was a movement to just totally suspend the fall sports, and there were people at the time in the medical profession who were citing what turned out to be, bogus studies about how it affects the heart and all this other stuff. And I was convinced that that was not accurate because we had been having kids play sports all summer and summer camps and all kind of other stuff. And so my view was, that's not really what the data is showing. But second of all, parents and athletes can make the decision. No one is saying they have to play, but to deprive everyone the opportunity was unacceptable. So we pushed really hard to have the season start. We were able to do that, and we've had now we're 2.5 months of. It's been successful. We haven't had any major issues. Kids are really happy. People are being able to do things that they like, and the parents will say. Obviously, we have some athletes that are going to be great. They'll go to college, maybe play pro. But then there's just others that say, this is an important part of their development. It's important to their senior year. If we had suspended the season, they wouldn't have been able to play at all. And so it's been really, really positive. But I'll tell you, the fact that it was like a political football, I think is really disappointing in hindsight. And those jurisdictions throughout our country that still are not having high school sports, they are totally ignoring all the evidence and all the data to the detriment of millions of athletes around the country.
We own property in Florida, and I think we've talked about this before, down in the Panhandle. A lot of people where I live in Nashville, they come down. We're in Rosemary Beach. We come down for Thanksgiving, and the fact that you're talking about different state regulations brings that to mind. We spent May down in your state, and we spend a lot of time there. Did you see the regulations that came out from California about how Thanksgiving should take place in that state? And if so, do you just kind of throw up your hands and say, what in the world's going on? Because the reason why I bring that up is we're doing Thanksgiving down in your state, and I can't imagine, sitting outside, being 6 feet from each other, not being – it's absolute insanity.
No, you guys are welcome to enjoy your Thanksgiving in the state of Florida, as all families are, and they can make decisions that are best for them. But I'll tell you, what I've seen, though, is people fleeing the lockdowns. We have people who are moving from San Francisco and L.A. to Florida because the schools aren't in California. I actually have people moving from other countries. I know a friend of mine runs a school down in Miami, and they have people from Mexico and these other places say, well, our schools aren't open, so these are people with means who are doing it. So I think that people are voting with their feet on this. Of course, the really big problem with these lockdowns is that the lower income people aren't in a position to vote with their feet, and so they really suffer the brunt of this, which is very, very unfortunate. But it's interesting. Disney World, Orlando, has been open for months. Universal Studios, SeaWorld, open for months in Orlando. But then in California, they're not allowed to operate. But yet there's even the New York Times did an article acknowledging that there has not been a single outbreak linked to Walt Disney World. And I would say that just with outdoor, the theme parks are mostly outdoor. None of these football games, none of these events outdoors have led to any significant outbreaks that we've been able to determine. President's rallies, the media put out a hit on that, but it was a model that didn't actually identify any actual infections. So there haven't been any actual outbreaks in Florida linked to president's outdoor rallies. And I think that that's instructive. Okay, we've been seeing this now for months and months. Now, I know we do have people going to football games at limited capacity, but I'm supportive of having more capacity because I think that just these outdoor venues are not significant vectors for spread. You'd much and here's what's really kills me, Clay, is when they limit the capacity for the game, and a lot of these colleges are not allowing, say, tailgating. So what ends up happening is the people that can't get into the stadium, they're packing into like a bar or packing into their apartment or homes together, and they're watching the game and partying that way. We'd be better off from a virus perspective if they were just in the stands outdoors.
It is fascinating. And speaking of being in the stands outdoors, you've got the Super Bowl this year. And I know Tom Brady and the Bucs are on a roll, and you came on with us before the season started and thought you said you thought they were going to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and that's certainly true. The Dolphins just broke out Tua, and there seems to be a decent amount of excitement with what Brian Flores is building down in Miami. What do you expect to see in Tampa for the Super Bowl? I know it's a little ways away in February, but what kind of environment are you anticipating there?
Well, I want to have a Super Bowl environment. We had a Super Bowl the second week of February in Miami of 2020, and Clay, COVID was here. Now, we didn't really know at the time, because we didn't have the testing or whatnot, but, it was here, and we did it, and so I think you can do it. And that was with no one taking any precautions because, people just assumed it wasn't around, and so I think you need to have a Super Bowl experience. It's an important thing for the Tampa Bay area. Obviously, if Tom Brady can lead the Bucs, that would be historic to have a home game for the Super Bowl. So we would like to see a full Super Bowl take place, and I think we'll be in a position, if they follow the data, I think we'll be in a position to do that. One thing that some teams and venues have been concerned about is the liability. If somebody, gets COVID, they could say, well, I was at the game and I got it there. Obviously, it's very difficult to identify where someone would have acquired this, but there would be a lot of litigation. So we thought the federal government was going to do a litigation bill, and they haven't done it yet. So I think in the state of Florida, we will definitely do that probably after the election when the legislature comes back in. This way, businesses will know, they can operate. Obviously, we want people to take proper precautions, but, we don't want that to turn into a litigation bonanza. And I think that does create a disincentive for people to want to do some of these events.
That's a really good point. Both of you and I are lawyers, and I think a lot of people out there are not necessarily going to understand exactly what that means. So let me unpack that a little bit with you. Right now, if somebody goes to, let's say historically, somebody goes to an event, if they ended up getting the flu afterwards, they were never able to go back and say, hey, I'm suing the pet store or the football stadium or the Walmart or whatever it is because I believe I got the flu there. And that would require a great deal of speculation because causation and where exposure might have happened and everything else is so difficult. Yet there are businesses out there that are nervous about that possibility because the plaintiff lawyers are starting to circle and figure out different ways to potentially monetize COVID through the court system. What you're talking about is a state law that would protect businesses so people wouldn't be able to come out and say, hey, I'm alleging that I caught COVID sitting in a Tampa Bay Buccaneers stadium, and so I'm going to sue the NFL and the Bucs and everybody else for creating that environment. This basically says you're assuming risk in life, as we all have done for a long time, if you go out to a venue like those.
Yeah, and I think the hurdles that you cited with the flu would still be present with COVID. The problem would be is that you'd have all these cases brought, and the cost of litigation would be so significant that these businesses would just end up cutting checks to settle, and then that then feeds the fire even more, and then that leads to more lawsuits. And so we just want to avoid that. I mean, clearly this is not something that you would be able to prove, in a court of law for the same reasons you would do. So let's just wipe the slate clean, and let's not have that be a big part, because we've done better with the economy, than most in Florida, but we still have ways to go to recover the tourism. I mean, the Panhandle did great over the summer.
That's right.
Some of the places in Central Florida are still not where they're used to being, and so we want to get them back. And I think that would be a common sense thing to do, and I think people would feel more comfortable with putting on some of these events, and not just sports. I mean, these conventions. I mean, Las Vegas is quasi shut down, so all the convention stuff's died there. We'd like to bring some of that to the state of Florida, and I think we have done some, and I think they've done it responsibly, and there haven't been any problems. And so we want to continue to put people back to work in that hospitality industry.
We're talking to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. I want to go back to the Super Bowl for a sec now. You said you'd like to see the stadium full. It's in February. It's still several months from now. We know how crazy predicting anything has been. What kind of expectation do you have as to the crowd that will be able to show up? Do you think full is possible? Do you think 50%? Like, if you were setting the odds right now, the Super Bowl seems like it's going to happen, knock on wood, at a normal date and normal time. What would you like to see it from a spectator perspective?
Yeah, I want as robust of Super Bowl experience as we can get. I think you've seen a variety of approaches in some of these stadiums. There's not been any problems that I've been able to see in any of these stuff. There's some states that don't allow any of the fans on the NFL games. Yeah. They play in an empty stadium. The ones that do it have not had any problems. And what I've told the teams here is, okay, if you're going to start off with 15,000, do 20,000 the next week, and then 25, and then build up. Yep. To that. So hopefully by the time we get into next year, we're going to be in good shape. And don't forget, Clay, we also in January we have the College Football National Championship in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium, and so we want that to be a robust experience as well. And I also think you'll start to see. I know UFC is going to want to, do some big events with the crowds. It'd be interesting to see what WWE wants to start doing. But I think that there's going to be a hunger to start doing it. And my view is we know a lot about COVID-19 at this point. We understand the risks. We understand which demographics are more susceptible. And at the end of the day, I think individuals just need to be able to make choices about what kind of environment they want to be in. Do you want to go to a spectator sport? Then you should be able to do it. If you don't want to, you're not comfortable, God bless you. No one's saying you have to do it, but to deprive everyone, I think, of the choice to have those experiences is not advisable. And particularly when you're talking about these outdoor venues, we've just not seen that be a significant vector for any type of COVID outbreaks.
I want to mention the Disney World thing. As you said, the fact that Disneyland is still closed is absolutely insane to me when you actually look at the data. I believe, and you would know better than me because of what you deal with on the hospitality and tourism front on a day-to-day basis, I believe Disneyland is the only Disney park in the world that is not open right now. And you guys at Disney World have been open for a long time. But I just want to say, my parents, 75 years old, they went down and spent a week at Disney with my two nephews and my niece and their family, and they said it was fantastic. I mean, look, it wasn't spectacularly crowded. They could get around. They, like I think many people out there, have just decided you can't live in fear forever. They want to go to Disney World with their nieces and nephews. They're not sure how long they're going to be able to do that. And they loved it, and they said it was fantastic. And so I think you're probably starting to see an uptick there. But that difference in treatment is absolute insanity when you look at the data that you guys have been open for months. And as you referenced, the New York Times hasn't been able to trace. The New York Times hasn't exactly been a newspaper that's been very COVID, positive in terms of sharing news that isn't designed to terrify people. And they wrote a fair and very accurate piece that it had been so far very safe, quoting a lot of different people, workers and tourists.
Yeah, no, and I think you're going to continue to see it. And I also think that people are starting to understand. So we have been getting a lot of traffic in Disney with people that are driving.
Yes.
We're still not where we need to be on flying, although it is steadily getting better. But the number of outbreaks on airplanes is virtually zero.
That's right.
And you would think that that's a confined environment, but I think it's something with the air circulation or however they do it. And so it really is safe to fly. It's safer to fly than it is to drive in your car for a variety of reasons. But even with COVID, you're probably more likely to get it if you have 6 family members packed in an SUV than if you're on a plane. So we want to see more plane travel, but we also want to see it from places like Brazil and the UK, some of the places where there are travel restrictions. We're also going to be having our cruise ship industry relaunch soon. Now, the CDC has made it more difficult with some of the restrictions that they've put on, but we think with rapid testing and stuff, the industry will be able to get back on its feet, and that'll drive more people. But, you know, the human faces of this are the people that are working, and these are people that are making, you know, $12 an hour, $15 an hour, and putting food on the table for their families, and they need to be able to get back to work. So we're hoping we'll be able to do that. So the hospitality, a lot of it, I think they have the tools that they need. I think it's just continuing to break down some of the psychological barriers. I think more and more people are interested compared to where we were in March and April, but we're clearly not back to 100% of where, you know, everyone is really comfortable going. Maybe the election will change people's attitude, and we'll see how the media responds to that. But I think that's what we're looking to do going forward.
What's the COVID situation in hospitals in Florida? You guys have been, I mean, there's been so much panic, so much what I call fear porn surrounding the state of Florida in general. And I think you've done a good job on social media trying to put out the actual data. And the state of Florida in general has put out very good data. What is the latest in terms of where the hospitals are in the state of Florida as it pertains to COVID?
Yeah, so we have 28% of all beds are empty, 27% of ICU beds are empty, and that, just so your listeners understand, ICUs usually run at 90%, and so this is a lot of capacity. We have about 3.5% of all our licensed beds are COVID-positive patients, so we're at about 2,350 COVID-positive patients. That is down 70 to 80% from our July peak, and we've basically been in the low 2000s now for probably about 6 weeks, and that's really, I think, in a situation where you have an endemic virus, I don't think it's realistic to get to zero, so you're going to continue to have admissions, but these are at relatively stable and relatively low numbers, and certainly per capita, we're far less in terms of current hospitalizations compared to a lot of the states you're seeing, like in Illinois or Wisconsin or some of those.
We're talking to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, it is Election Day, and I appreciate given how busy it is going to be on your schedule, you coming on with us. First, what do you expect to see in Florida? We've got a lot of people in Florida who are listening to us right now, but also in the nation. What do you expect in terms of in-person voting? Are you ready and able to handle whatever the audience is that is going to show up? And what percentage of Florida voters do you think are going to be in person versus absentee or mail-in or the way that's set up, maybe in comparison to past elections?
Yeah, I think you'll end up seeing fewer people on Election Day than probably in years past. I think part of that is you've had a big switch for Democrat voters to mail-in voting because of COVID fears, and you've had a big switch from Republicans from mail-in voting to in-person voting, but some of that was captured in early voting. We actually decisively outvoted Republicans, the Democrats, in in-person early voting. That's never happened. They outstripped Republicans in the mail voting. So what we're looking at going into Election Day is Democrats have a little bit more than 100,000 ballot advantage. Now, we don't know that the Democrats are all voting Democrat. We just know there are 100,000 plus more Democrats have either done vote by mail or in-person early voting than Republicans. I think that puts Trump in a good position because we have a couple 100,000 more super voters who haven't voted and we know will vote on Election Day. So I think the turnout on Election Day is going to decisively favor the president. So my sense is that the Democrats probably didn't stockpile the number of votes that they needed to in this early voting period. And I think that their Election Day turnout is going to lag, partially because of the COVID fears, and I think the Election Day turnout for Republicans will surge. But we anticipated having a more significant deficit going into Election Day than we ended up having, and part of it, I was in Miami with the president last night, late, like 11:30 p.m. midnight rally, and that's a county he lost by 30 points in 2016. He ain't going to lose it by 30 this time. Not going to win it because it's a Democrat county, but I think he's going to end up getting cutting that margin by a third to a half, and that's 100 to 125,000 vote swing. But he's got people energized down there like he didn't have in 2016. So I think he has the advantage, going in on Election Day into Florida. And if the folks who normally vote, then I think he's going to end up winning Florida, probably in the same ballpark that he did last time, maybe a little more.
How soon will we have election data from Florida that's out? A lot of people are sitting around. Usually we have an election night. Obviously, it's different with COVID and the way people are voting now. When would you anticipate knowing what the results in Florida would be? Is that something that happens late tonight? Is it something that happens Wednesday, Thursday?
No.
What kind of your expectation?
Yeah, no, you should. We should have a result tonight. Now, if it's like a 10,000 vote margin, then obviously you have to figure out overseas ballots and all that. But assuming it's not, assuming that it's a percent or more, we will have all the early and in-person mail and in-person votes tabulated that have arrived by 7 p.m. Tuesday night. So all those ballots will be counted. Then they count as it comes in through the day. So they're going to be able to start reporting this stuff 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Now remember, the Panhandle closes at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. The others close at 7 Eastern. And so we're going to be able to see that. So I think you'll get numbers, and we'll have a good sense of this. I would say by 9 o'clock we should know one way or another. And part of it is, we have had some problems with elections in Florida. When I came in, I accepted the resignation of Brenda Snipes down in Broward County, and then I removed the Palm Beach supervisor because they've had so many problems. So we have new people in there, and so far their elections have run very smoothly. So as long as those two counties run smoothly, which we anticipate they will with these personnel changes, I think you'll have a result, I think hopefully far before midnight. Now, I think some of the networks, quite frankly, are going to be loath to call this for Trump if he is in fact winning. But what we'll end up doing is, if we can say that Broward and Palm Beach are 100% in and the president's up, there's not going to be very many places around the state where they will be able to make up probably the votes that they need. And look, if it's vice versa, if Broward and Palm Beach aren't in and Biden's winning, well, then that probably they're going to continue to add to that. So we probably will have a good sense. And in Florida, you have to send in your mail ballot. It has to arrive by 7 p.m. on Election Day. I think that's very important because in some of these places like Pennsylvania now, you can actually have the ballots arrive afterwards, and they don't even have to be postmarked. So in a place like Philadelphia where they have a machine, that's not going to inspire confidence, certainly amongst Republicans. And so our election ends at 7 p.m. on election night, on Tuesday night, and that's the universe of votes that are going to be cast. We'll know how many have been cast, count it, and then certify a winner.
Where will you watch the election results as a governor? You're not on the ballot. You've already you were elected a couple of years ago. How do you spend election night?
I'll be in the governor's mansion. I thought about maybe because I think the president's going to have some at the White House, but at the end of the day, we're overseeing the election. We want to make sure everything runs smooth. And then we also are prepared if there is any unrest, we have the resources ready to go to be deployed. Now, I'm not sure that that's going to be necessary in Florida, but if it is, we're going to respond very quickly. So I think that being at the mansion is the right thing to do, being in Tallahassee. So that's where we'll be, and we'll be monitoring the returns. And, hopefully we have a smooth election. It's been very smooth so far with early voting and the mail voting, and we think we can keep that up on election day. And look, it could be a situation. 20 years ago, Bush versus Gore, Florida was kind of the laughing stock, the centerpiece, and it could be 2020 that we're one of the first states to do a smooth count and certification, and then you may have some of these other states that go a week or two and have a lot of controversy surrounding them.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, I really appreciate you coming on this show and pushing as hard as you can and have high school, college, pro sports, you coming on when you did to I think, speak out in favor of the ACC and the SEC playing in the state of Florida was a big deal. And I know there are a lot of sports fans out there that are looking forward to you guys having the national title game down in Miami and the Super Bowl in Tampa. Should be a lot of fun to be able to culminate both of those seasons in your state.
Great. Yeah, no, happy to do it, and we appreciate you guys at Outkick supporting kids getting back in the classroom and getting back on the sports fields.
Outstanding as always. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Appreciate it, my man.